So a lot of this chapter is about what could go wrong. So let's talk about what could go wrong. How you could end up with bias, and what things you have to try to avoid to decrease the bias in your study, or to eliminate the bias in your study. The first problem is undercoverage, which is when there are certain segments of the population that would never become part of your sample because of the way you're conducting your study. For example, there's no way that a lone adult, or that somebody living alone, or that somebody in their 80s without children or grandchildren in the school system would end up being surveyed for my average electric bill in Swansea study if I just asked my students to bring in their electric bills. They're going to bring in their own or of their parents, and their parents are all between like late 30s and late 50s, so there's no way that a household headed, well, okay, maybe grandparents, some people are living with their grandparents, but there's no way that single people in their 20s would ever be included in my survey. And so as a result, there are certain segments of the population that are not going to end up in my study, period, and that means that I will be biased against whatever those segments are. Let's say people in their 20s use a lot of electricity, well then I'm going to end up with an average electric bill that is lower than the true average in Swansea. Because my study's going to end up missing the mark because it's been biased by leaving out a certain group. I don't know which direction this bias is. If there is undercoverage, if there are certain segments of the population that could not be included in my study, then the study is biased. I may not know which direction it's biased in, but I know it's biased. Next is, let me read you the textbook definition actually for undercoverage. Undercoverage occurs when some members of the population cannot be chosen in a sample. And now non-response, let me read you the textbook definition for that. Non-response occurs when an individual chosen for the sample can't be contacted or refuses to participate. So some people have, let's say that particular people feel embarrassed about their electric bill, maybe it's too big, maybe it's too small, I don't know. But certain people don't bother bringing it in, or maybe certain people are very private. Let's say certain people are very private about their family's expenses. They don't want to tell Mr. Beit-Aharon, how much they pay for electricity in a given month, so they don't participate. And I don't know, as the person running the survey, I don't know if the people refusing to participate are refusing because their electric bills, something relating to their electric bills being too small, or something related to the electric bills being too big. So the very fact that some people are not responding means that there is possibly bias in my study. I don't know which direction it's in, but there may be bias in my study created by these people not responding. Next, there's response bias. Let's say I'm doing a survey about the election, and I start off by saying, who here believes that politicians in Washington are doing a great job? And most people say no, because everybody knows that politicians in Washington are doing a terrible job, right? It's sort of like this feeling that everybody in the culture has. And then after that, I ask them, do you support Trump or Clinton? That first question sort of leads them down a particular mode of thought that is going to make them more likely to say something specific right after they've been asked that question. And when the wording of questions or the way it's presented affects the answer, that's called a response bias. I wonder if that's in the textbook. Let me see if I can find it. It's probably not in that section. But suffice it to say, there are lots of other ways of introducing bias into your study. In some questions, they may ask you, is this study biased? If so, explain how. And you won't necessarily have to use one of these key buzzwords. You just have to usually describe in words what could have happened to lead your study to be biased in a specific direction. I will read you the definition of bias, because they give us one. Bias. The design of a statistical study shows bias if it would consistently underestimate or consistently overestimate the value you want to know. You don't have to know if it's going to consistently underestimate or overestimate. You just need to know that the design consistently misses in one direction. Consistently doesn't mean every time, because variability can sometimes reduce or counteract the bias, but it won't always. Other times it'll just amplify the visible appearance of bias, the outward result. Bias is you've designed your study in a way that will miss the mark in one specific direction. We don't know which direction sometimes, but in a specific direction in general.